It's one of the scariest things that can happen to a person. These people were all trapped and managed to escape. Number 2 is literally out of this world.
Number 8, Angelo Hays. This has been called the most remarkable 20th century instance of premature burial. In 1937, this French youth crashed on his motorcycle, hitting his head into a brick wall. He was scheduled for a closed casket funeral because he was so mangled by the impact. There was no pulse. The funeral occurred, and that was that. Until 2 days later, his body was exhumed by an insurance company running an investigation.
There was just one problem. Angelo Hays was still warm.
To doctors' surprise, he had just gone into a very deep coma and had a very low oxygen requirement. Hays was still alive. Several emergency surgeries were performed, and he made a full recovery. He eventually became a celebrity, traveling around France to talk to fans and skeptics alike, and he even had a special coffin-like chamber made up to enhance his reputation with food, toilet, and a small library. He did exhibitions where he stayed buried in this coffin for multiple days at a time. Number 7, Jason Rivera and Elijah Martinez. These two boys were playing in the snow near their home in New York in 2013, when a large snowplow dumped a massive amount of snow on top of them, sealing them in an icy prison for several hours. The boys were trapped. They could barely move, and they were under several feet, that's 1 meter or more, of snow. They had barely enough oxygen to stay conscious for those scary hours, and they screamed to try and get any passersby to hear them. Despite moving his shoulders and trying to punch his way out of the snow, Martinez couldn't free himself or his younger cousin, and Rivera was pinned by a large, heavy block of ice, immobile. They kept each other alert and moving, motivated not to fall asleep for fear of freezing to death. Police officer Rolla saved their lives, spending hours looking around the neighborhood for any kind of identifier for the missing boys. After finding their shovel sticking out of the pile of snow, he acted quickly, digging to free the trapped children.
Despite hypothermia, neither of the boys suffered any frostbite or long-term injuries from the incident.
But they will definitely think twice before building another snow fort. Number 6, Mena. This teenager was digging a massive hole in the sand of Newport Beach, California along the shore, as much as 7 feet or over 2 meters deep, with a friend. They wanted to connect the holes underground, but while working on their little construction project, the tunnel collapsed, burying Matt inside. Stuck under feet of sand, the teenager screamed, trying to get people to hear him and rescue him. He wasn't sure if anyone was coming to rescue him, panicked, and passed out. But there was a crowd of rescuers working together to excavate the whole area and dig him out. After half an hour of nervous digging, the group finally got Matt out of the hole, and he was taken to the local hospital for a follow-up. He suffered no injuries during the burial, just a terrific scare. The 40 people who worked together to free him deserved all the thanks in the world.
This incident was captured on video, and it is a testament to the power of a group of people working together during an emergency.
Number 5, Brian Clark. This man was trapped in the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. What's most astonishing about Mr. Clark is that he was working that morning on one of the floors above where the plane hit. Only 4 people survived from above the plane's impact point in the South Tower, and no one escaped from above it in the North Tower. Clark was the volunteer fire warden for his level of the World Trade Center, and when the plane struck, he led a group of coworkers down one of the flights of stairs. They felt the heat of the fire burning on the level that the plane had struck, and they thought they might be trapped up there. Despite flames and smoke and the group's reluctance to keep going down towards the fire, Clark went into the office space on the 81st floor when he heard the screams of a trapped man, Stanley Premnath. He convinced Premnath to jump and pull himself over the debris, then grabbed him and pulled him clear of a large block of drywall. Then the 2 men proceeded down the 80 flights of stairs through the heat of nearby fires and the dark clouds of smoke and dust. The rest of Clark's group of coworkers, reluctant to brave the smoke and fire, went to the roof to be evacuated. They did not survive.
Less than 5 minutes after running out of the ground floor of the tower, the 2 men watched it collapse.
Now, Clark has appeared on multiple documentaries and shows to describe his ordeal. He is one of the last people to escape the towers on that horrific day. Number 4. Jessica McClure. Baby Jessica, as she was known, fell down a small well in her grandmother's backyard in Midland, Texas in 1987. The opening of the well was only 8 inches wide, but the toddler was small enough to tumble more than 20 feet, about 7 meters, deep into this hole in the ground. Over the next 60 hours, a remarkable group effort unfolded to try to free the terrified baby from the well. A microphone was lowered into the well, where rescue workers heard her crying. They immediately put a hose down the well to deliver oxygen, as well as warm air to keep Jessica from freezing to death. Then a group of oil well workers quickly sprang into action, digging a massive hole parallel to the well and cutting horizontally across to open up a gap for a paramedic to drop down and grab Jessica. It took longer than anticipated because the jackhammers and drills were not the best tools for digging horizontally, so the rescuers had to use the, at the time, new technique of water jet cutting, or water drilling. A high-pressure jet of water pointed at the rock quickly carved out a space in the rock face. The rescue tunnel wasn't particularly wide either, but paramedic Robert O'Donnell was able to slide down the hole and grab baby Jessica after over 2 days underground.
This media incident received non-stop press coverage, and afterwards even meetings with Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush.
Jessica survived, recovered after numerous surgeries, and now works as a school teacher with 2 children of her own. Number 3. Aaron Ralston. This man became the inspiration for the movie 127 Hours. On April 26, 2003, Ralston was exploring alone in Wayne County, Utah, in Blue John Canyon. This was in the remote Canyonlands National Park, one of the most isolated and sparsely populated places in the continental United States. While he was climbing, a boulder fell and crushed his right hand against the canyon wall, pinning him there under an 800-pound rock. He had no cell phone, nor any cell phone service in that remote area, and no one knew where he was. He was truly stuck. He didn't have a lot of food, and after running low on water, he became dehydrated and convinced that he was going to die. Then he had a hallucination on the 5th day of his predicament, where he saw himself playing with a child while missing part of his arm. He decided to sever his own right arm in order to try to make an escape. He broke his own arm bones and slowly severed tendons in order to free himself. He used a makeshift tourniquet to keep from bleeding out and painfully climbed out of the canyon. After hiking for several hours, he was rescued.
According to Ralston, if he had amputated his own arm sooner, he would have bled out because many of the blood vessels would have still been pumping blood in his arm. However, if he had waited a few days longer, he would have died of dehydration.
This young man was foolish when picking out his climbing location and failing to inform people of his whereabouts, but he was extremely brave when it came to escaping. He subsequently wrote an autobiography about his experience in the canyon. The docudrama film about his ordeal, 127 Hours, was critically acclaimed, and now Ralston is a public speaker and minor celebrity. Impressive. Number 2. Apollo 13. One of the most gripping space missions of all time, Apollo 13 was not only a worldwide phenomenon when it occurred, but thanks to the major film of the same name released in 1995, it has remained a huge part of popular culture and a testament to ingenuity and bravery. The flight occurred on April 11, 1970, and lasted for 6 days. Halfway through, there was, for lack of a better term, a problem. The eternal line, "Houston, we have a problem," was actually a small misquote. It was, "Houston, we've had a problem here." It occurred when the spacecraft was 200,000 miles, or over 300,000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth. A major electrical malfunction meant that there was not enough voltage flowing from the fuel cells to the electrical grid of the command module. This was a potentially deadly misfire. The first of many key decisions was made to loop the astronauts around the moon and then swing back to Earth in order to conserve power. This wild maneuver meant that the crew of the Apollo 13 was the furthest away from planet Earth of anyone in history, over 400,000 kilometers off the surface of the Earth. In order to remove the excess carbon dioxide exhaled by the astronauts, there were certain canisters of lithium hydroxide pellets that were designed to absorb the CO2, but there weren't enough left to support the 3 astronauts for the return trip. The solution? With duct tape, plastic, and paper covers, the men jury-rigged a solution to use other, differently shaped canisters to work in the lunar module. Then there was the issue of water. The crew was running low and needed water to cool the power system as well as stay hydrated. The solution was to cut rations and cut power, and the men lost about 10 pounds each of water during the whole voyage. The temperature also dropped in the dark, cold, cramped module as the men hurtled back towards Earth.
After 6 days in space, the crew safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean and were picked up by the USS Iwo Jima.
They were immediately lauded as heroes and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And yes, successfully landing after being trapped in space in a deteriorating and low-oxygen spacecraft qualifies as one of the most terrifying escapes of all time.
But there's still one more, even more brave escape from being trapped. But first, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, and turn notifications on, and speak up in the comments. Have you ever been trapped somewhere? Maybe in an elevator that wouldn't start? Or a stuck car somewhere in the wilderness? How scary was it? Speak up in the comments below.
Number 1. Endurance. This is the most impressive story of heroism in the face of mortal danger of all time. Like the Apollo 13 mission, all the crew members survived insurmountable odds, and it was only through the incredible discipline and leadership of Sir Ernest Shackleton that the men made it out alive. The Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition of 1914 began with 28 men setting sail from England aboard the Endurance, docking in the South Sandwich Islands and moving towards Antarctica. Unfortunately, the men became trapped in the sea ice in early 1915, which was soon to become their downfall. They could not move freely, and over the next 6 months, the Endurance sat with the pack, eventually becoming squeezed so hard that the hull splintered and forced the men to abandon ship. There they were, at the bottom of the world, with no other humans for hundreds of miles in any direction, and no ship. So they camped on the ice with their supplies, salvaged from the ruined ship, as they drifted through the sea, biding their time to make a break for land in their lifeboats. After several months of perilous camping on the ice, drifting through the remote ocean, the ice broke up and the men started sailing furiously for the empty and desolate Elephant Island. With little supplies, icy ocean surrounding them, and no way to turn back, the men made it to firm land and set up a small camp there. Then, Shackleton had to sail again to get to civilization in a small lifeboat in the harshest waters on planet Earth. And against all odds, they made it again. Then, as one final slap of fate, Shackleton had to climb across 26 miles of mountains in the snowy winter of South Georgia Island, which almost killed the men yet again. Despite the insane risks, they stumbled into the small whaling station 3 years after their departure, looking so ragged that the whalers thought that they were ghosts. But no, they were very much alive.
It's impossible to overstate how scary a journey like the Endurance must have been. But thanks to stubborn, crazy obstinance, the voyage became a symbol of bravery and willpower.